You think people are hard to control. The truth is, most control happens without force, without threats, and without anyone realizing it. This is where dark psychology becomes powerful. One of the most effective psychological tricks in dark psychology is the illusion of choice. It feels harmless, but it is one of the most subtle manipulation techniques used in mind control techniques and subconscious influence. The illusion of choice works because the human brain craves autonomy. People resist direct commands, but they rarely resist options. When you offer 2 or 3 choices, the target feels empowered. In reality, both options are designed to lead to the same outcome. This is not random persuasion. This is structured influence and persuasion rooted in psychology of control. Dark psychology teaches that control people does not mean forcing people. It means guiding perception. Through subconscious influence, you reduce resistance while increasing compliance. For example, instead of asking, "Do you want to help me?" you ask, "Do you want to help now or after lunch?" The decision shifts from yes or no to when. That shift is the core of manipulation techniques used in social manipulation. The person believes they are choosing freely, yet the frame has already been controlled. This is how mind control techniques operate beneath awareness. The psychology of control shows that once someone makes a small choice, they subconsciously commit to the direction of that choice. Influence and persuasion become easier because the brain wants consistency. Dark psychology leverages this natural bias. Subconscious influence works best when the target feels safe and respected. That is why psychological tricks, like the illusion of choice, are so powerful in social manipulation. If you understand how to control people through structured options, you are no longer guessing. You are applying dark psychology principles, using manipulation techniques, ethically or strategically, and mastering influence and persuasion through proven mind control techniques, rooted in the psychology of control. Most people expose themselves without realizing it. They reveal weaknesses, intentions, insecurities, all because they cannot tolerate silence. In dark psychology, silence is not absence, it is pressure. And one of the most underestimated psychological tricks used in manipulation techniques and subconscious influence is strategic silence. If you want to understand how to control people without force, you must understand how silence activates the psychology of control and makes influence and persuasion effortless. The human brain is uncomfortable with gaps in conversation. When silence appears, tension rises. The other person feels an internal need to fill that space. This is where dark psychology becomes powerful. Instead of arguing, defending, or explaining, you simply remain calm and quiet. In social manipulation, silence creates dominance without aggression. It subtly shifts the frame. The person speaking begins to doubt themselves, over-explain, or reveal more information than necessary. That is subconscious influence in action. Strategic silence is one of the most refined mind control techniques because it does not look like control. It looks like patience. But psychologically, it activates the psychology of control by forcing the other person to seek validation or reassurance. When someone asks you a question and you pause longer than expected, they often continue talking. When someone challenges you and you respond with calm silence, they begin to feel exposed. These psychological tricks work because the brain interprets silence as social evaluation. Dark psychology understands that the person who controls the emotional rhythm controls the interaction. Manipulation techniques do not always require words. Sometimes the absence of words creates stronger influence and persuasion than arguments ever could. Through subconscious influence, silence makes the other person adjust their behavior to regain comfort. If you truly want to control people without them knowing, learn to master stillness. In social manipulation, the quietest person often holds the most power. Silence is not weakness. Within dark psychology, silence is psychological warfare disguised as composure, and one of the most effective mind control techniques rooted in the psychology of control. What if I told you that you don't control decisions by changing someone's logic? You control decisions by controlling their emotions. In dark psychology, this is where real power begins. One of the most powerful psychological tricks used in manipulation techniques and subconscious influence is emotional anchoring. If you understand how emotions shape perception, you understand how to control people without them ever noticing the psychology of control happening beneath the surface. The human brain does not make decisions based purely on facts. It makes decisions based on emotional states and then justifies them with logic. Dark psychology teaches that if you attach yourself, your idea, or your request to a strong emotional experience, you create a subconscious link. That link becomes automatic. This is how mind control techniques operate subtly. Through subconscious influence, a person begins associating you with comfort, fear, excitement, or validation. Once that association forms, influence and persuasion become effortless. For example, if someone consistently feels confident and empowered when talking to you, their brain anchors that emotion to your presence. This is not accidental. It is structured social manipulation. Emotional anchoring is one of the most advanced manipulation techniques because it bypasses resistance. Instead of forcing agreement, you create a feeling. And in the psychology of control, feelings are stronger than arguments. Dark psychology explains that once an emotional anchor is installed, behavior follows automatically. If a person feels anxious when they disappoint you, they will unconsciously try to maintain your approval. That is subconscious influence shaping behavior without direct commands. Psychological tricks like this operate below awareness, making control people a matter of emotional conditioning rather than confrontation. The key to influence and persuasion is not dominance. It is emotional positioning. Through dark psychology and strategic manipulation techniques, you can design emotional experiences that guide decisions. Mind control techniques rooted in the psychology of control do not rely on pressure. They rely on emotional repetition. Master emotional anchoring, and social manipulation becomes nearly invisible, yet incredibly powerful. People naturally trust those who seem like themselves. It is one of the most overlooked psychological tricks in dark psychology, yet it is extremely powerful. Mirroring is a subtle technique within manipulation techniques and subconscious influence that allows you to control people without them realizing it. When someone sees themselves reflected in your behavior, tone, or body language, their brain associates you with familiarity and safety, and this is where influence and persuasion become almost automatic within the psychology of control. The human brain is wired to recognize patterns. When someone subconsciously notices that you speak like them, move like them, or even breathe at a similar pace, it triggers trust. Dark psychology uses this natural mechanism to create rapport instantly. Through subconscious influence, mirroring aligns perceptions and reduces resistance. People will share more, listen more, and unconsciously follow guidance when they perceive you as one of them. This is a mind control technique disguised as empathy, a psychological trick that feels natural but drives behavior. Mirroring is effective because it exploits social instincts. When you mirror subtly, you are not mimicking, you are creating an invisible alignment that guides choices. Manipulation techniques rely on small, undetectable nudges like these to control people. Emotional comfort and familiarity lower defenses, and the psychology of control works quietly, shaping decisions without overt commands. Subconscious influence is strongest when the target believes they are in charge, yet their behavior aligns perfectly with your intent. In dark psychology, mirroring becomes a core tool for anyone seeking influence and persuasion. Control people without them knowing by reflecting their energy and tone back at them. The brain interprets mirrored behavior as a sign of empathy and trustworthiness. Once the connection is established, mind control techniques operate effortlessly. Psychological tricks like mirroring demonstrate that influence does not require force, only subtle alignment. And through strategic subconscious influence, you can guide perception and decisions invisibly, mastering the psychology of control. Why do people chase what they think they might lose? Why does something instantly become more valuable the moment it feels limited? In dark psychology, this reaction is not random, it is programmed. One of the most powerful psychological tricks used in manipulation techniques and subconscious influence is the scarcity trigger. If you truly want to control people without direct force, you must understand how scarcity activates the psychology of control and strengthens influence and persuasion almost instantly. The human brain is wired to fear loss more than it values gain. This bias is the foundation of many mind control techniques. When something feels rare, exclusive, or time-limited, the brain shifts into urgency mode. Logical thinking decreases, emotional response increases. Dark psychology leverages this instinct by framing opportunities, attention, or access as limited. Through subconscious influence, the person begins to act quickly, often without fully analyzing the decision. That is how control people subtly works inside social manipulation. For example, when you say, "This opportunity won't be available for long," you activate scarcity. When attention is given and then slightly withdrawn, value increases. Manipulation techniques often use controlled availability to raise perceived importance. The psychology of control shows that when people fear losing something, status, approval, access, time, they become more compliant. Influence and persuasion grow stronger because the emotional brain takes control. Scarcity is effective in dark psychology because it does not look like pressure. It looks like reality, yet it is carefully framed reality. Subconscious influence intensifies when a person believes they must act now or risk missing out. These psychological tricks make decisions feel urgent and personal. Mind control techniques built on scarcity create momentum without argument. If you understand how to use scarcity within manipulation techniques, you can control people without confrontation. In social manipulation, value is often created by limitation. Dark psychology reveals that influence and persuasion are strongest when access feels uncertain. Master the scarcity trigger, and the psychology of control begins working in your favor through powerful subconscious influence. Have you ever agreed with something simply because everyone else seemed to agree? That reaction is not weakness, it is programming. In dark psychology, one of the most powerful psychological tricks used in manipulation techniques and subconscious influence is social proof manipulation. If you want to control people without direct pressure, you must understand how the psychology of control exploits the human need to belong. Influence and persuasion become effortless when the crowd appears to have already decided. The human brain constantly looks for cues about what is safe, correct, or acceptable. When uncertainty appears, people scan their environment and copy the majority. Dark psychology recognizes this instinct and uses it strategically. By creating the perception that an idea, behavior, or decision is widely accepted, you activate subconscious influence. The target no longer evaluates independently, they align automatically. This is one of the most effective mind control techniques because it feels rational, not forced. In social manipulation, even subtle phrases like, "Most people choose this," or "Everyone knows this works," shift perception. The psychology of control shows that once someone believes they are following a norm, resistance drops. Manipulation techniques based on social proof work because people fear isolation more than they fear being wrong. Influence and persuasion intensify when agreement appears popular. Through subconscious influence, the mind interprets majority behavior as evidence of truth. Dark psychology uses controlled environments to amplify this effect. Testimonials, visible support, group reinforcement, all are structured psychological tricks designed to control people without confrontation. When individuals see others complying, they mirror that compliance. Mind control techniques rooted in social proof reduce decision anxiety and accelerate agreement. If you understand how to engineer perceived consensus, You master one of the most subtle forms of control people experience daily. In dark psychology, social manipulation thrives on belonging. The psychology of control teaches that influence and persuasion are strongest when the target believes the decision is already validated by others. Through calculated subconscious influence, social proof turns conformity into silent compliance. Why do people say yes to something small and then suddenly find themselves agreeing to something much bigger? That shift is not accidental. In dark psychology, one of the most effective psychological tricks used in manipulation techniques and subconscious influence is the foot in the door method. If you truly want to control people without obvious force, you must understand how the psychology of control uses small commitments to create larger compliance. Influence and persuasion begin with a single yes. The human brain is wired for consistency. Once someone agrees to a small request, their identity subtly adjusts. They begin to see themselves as cooperative, supportive, or aligned with you. Dark psychology leverages this identity shift. Through subconscious influence, a minor action becomes the foundation for future agreement. This is one of the most practical mind control techniques because it feels harmless at first. The initial request is easy to accept, which lowers resistance and opens the door to deeper social manipulation. For example, asking someone for a small favor creates psychological momentum. When the second, larger request comes, rejecting it would create internal conflict. The psychology of control shows that people avoid inconsistency because it threatens their self-image. Manipulation techniques built on gradual escalation make control people appear natural. Influence and persuasion grow stronger because each yes reinforces the next decision. Dark psychology understands that control does not require dominance. It requires sequence. Subconscious influence increases when compliance feels self-chosen. By designing a progression of small agreements, you guide behavior step by step. These psychological tricks work quietly, shaping decisions without triggering defense mechanisms. Mind control techniques rooted in gradual commitment transform minor cooperation into long-term alignment. If you master the foot in the door strategy, you master a core principle of social manipulation. The psychology of control proves that once someone steps forward slightly, they are more likely to continue walking in the same direction. Through strategic manipulation techniques and structured subconscious influence, influence and persuasion become a process rather than a push. What if showing weakness could actually give you control? It sounds contradictory, but in dark psychology, controlled vulnerability is one of the most strategic psychological tricks used in manipulation techniques and subconscious influence. If you want to control people without appearing dominant, you must understand how the psychology of control uses emotional openness to build influence and persuasion silently. Humans are wired to respond to vulnerability with empathy. When someone shares a personal struggle or admits a small flaw, it lowers defenses in the listener. Dark psychology does not use vulnerability randomly, it uses it selectively. Through subconscious influence, revealing a controlled weakness creates emotional reciprocity. The other person feels compelled to open up as well. This mutual disclosure builds rapid trust, and trust is the foundation of social manipulation. Mind control techniques often begin with emotional bonding rather than authority. In the psychology of control, trust reduces suspicion. When people trust you, they question you less. Manipulation techniques built around controlled vulnerability create a sense of intimacy and authenticity. Influence and persuasion become easier because resistance drops naturally. The person feels connected, not pressured. That connection strengthens subconscious influence and increases compliance over time. Dark psychology teaches that the key is balance. Too much vulnerability reduces authority, but strategic vulnerability increases relatability. When someone believes you understand them, they align with you. These psychological tricks work because humans crave connection. Control people subtly, by allowing them to feel emotionally significant in your presence. Subconscious influence deepens when they believe the bond is mutual and genuine. Mind control techniques rooted in emotional reciprocity shape long-term behavior. The psychology of control shows that once emotional trust is established, influence and persuasion require less effort. Through calculated manipulation techniques and structured social manipulation, controlled vulnerability becomes a silent lever. In dark psychology, power is not always about appearing strong. Sometimes it is about appearing human at the right moment to guide perception and decisions invisibly. What if the real power isn't controlling people, but controlling the meaning of what they see? In dark psychology, perception is reality. One of the most powerful psychological tricks used in manipulation techniques and subconscious influence is reframing reality. If you can shift interpretation, you can control people without ever changing the facts. This is where the psychology of control becomes invisible, and influence and persuasion begin to operate beneath awareness. The human brain does not respond to events. It responds to interpretations of events. Dark psychology understands that by changing the frame around a situation, you change emotional reactions. Through subconscious influence, the same outcome can feel like failure or growth, loss or opportunity, rejection or protection. Mind control techniques rooted in reframing work because people rarely question the lens through which information is presented. Once the frame is accepted, behavior follows naturally. For example, criticism can be reframed as feedback for improvement. Delay can be reframed as strategic timing. In social manipulation, whoever controls the narrative controls the emotional direction. Manipulation techniques that focus on reframing guide the target toward conclusions that feel self-generated. The psychology of control shows that when people believe they arrived at a perspective on their own, resistance disappears. Influence and persuasion strengthen because the new meaning feels logical and personal. Dark psychology leverages subtle language shifts to install new interpretations. Words like challenge, opportunity, or risk can alter emotional intensity instantly. These psychological tricks operate through subconscious influence, adjusting perception before conscious analysis begins. Control people not by forcing agreement, but by shaping context. When context shifts, decisions shift. Mind control techniques built on reframing are powerful because they are undetectable. The facts remain the same, but the emotional response transforms. Through structured manipulation techniques and deliberate social manipulation, you guide perception step by step. The psychology of control proves that whoever defines reality defines behavior. In dark psychology, influence and persuasion are not about overpowering others. They are about redesigning how others see the situation, quietly and strategically. Why do people become more attached when attention is unpredictable? Why does inconsistency create obsession? In dark psychology, this is not coincidence. One of the most powerful psychological tricks used in manipulation techniques and subconscious influence is the reward and withdrawal pattern. If you want to control people without direct pressure, you must understand how the psychology of control uses intermittent reinforcement to strengthen influence and persuasion. The human brain runs on dopamine. When someone receives praise, validation, or affection, the brain registers it as a reward. But dark psychology reveals something deeper. Consistent rewards create comfort, while unpredictable rewards create addiction. Through subconscious influence, alternating between approval and distance keeps the target emotionally engaged. This is one of the most effective mind control techniques because it triggers anticipation. The person begins seeking your validation, adjusting behavior to regain the reward. In social manipulation, this pattern is subtle. You show strong interest, then slightly pull back. You offer praise, then become neutral. Manipulation techniques built on this rhythm activate uncertainty, and uncertainty increases emotional focus. The psychology of control shows that when rewards are inconsistent, the brain works harder to secure them. Influence and persuasion intensify because the target wants stability and reassurance. Dark psychology uses this strategy carefully. Too much withdrawal creates detachment, but controlled unpredictability strengthens attachment. These psychological tricks operate beneath awareness through subconscious influence. The target believes their actions are self-driven, yet their behavior is shaped by the pursuit of emotional reward. Control people not by force, but by managing emotional reinforcement cycles. Mind control techniques rooted in intermittent reward create long-term behavioral patterns. The psychology of control proves that unpredictability heightens value perception. Through strategic manipulation techniques and structured social manipulation, reward and withdrawal become a silent lever of influence and persuasion. In dark psychology, emotional consistency creates comfort, but emotional unpredictability creates control, and control thrives through powerful subconscious influence. What moves people faster? The promise of gain, or the fear of losing something they already have? In dark psychology, the answer is clear. Loss is stronger than reward. One of the most powerful psychological tricks used in manipulation techniques and subconscious influence is activating the fear of loss. If you want to control people without confrontation, you must understand how the psychology of control uses loss aversion to intensify influence and persuasion instantly. The human brain is wired to avoid loss more aggressively than it seeks gain. This bias drives decisions in relationships, business, and social dynamics. Dark psychology leverages this instinct by shifting attention toward what could disappear: status, opportunity, connection, approval. Through subconscious influence, once the possibility of loss becomes real, emotional urgency increases. This is one of the most effective mind control techniques because it accelerates decision-making and lowers resistance. In social manipulation, framing is everything. Instead of saying, "You could benefit from this," you imply, "You might miss this opportunity." Manipulation techniques built around potential loss activate protective instincts. The psychology of control shows that when people believe something valuable is slipping away, they act quickly to secure it. Influence and persuasion grow stronger because the emotional brain overrides hesitation. Fear narrows focus and drives compliance. Dark psychology understands that the threat does not need to be extreme. Even subtle withdrawal of attention or reduced access can trigger powerful reactions. These psychological tricks operate through subconscious influence, making control people a matter of perception rather than force. When individuals feel they are about to lose something meaningful, they adjust behavior automatically. Mind control techniques rooted in loss aversion are effective because they feel urgent and personal. The psychology of control proves that perceived loss reshapes priorities instantly. Through strategic manipulation techniques and calculated social manipulation, influence and persuasion become emotionally charged. In dark psychology, the fear of losing what one values is often stronger than the desire to gain something new, and that fear can quietly shape decisions through deep subconscious influence. Power is rarely given. It is assumed by those who appear competent. In dark psychology, projecting authority is one of the most effective psychological tricks used in manipulation techniques and subconscious influence. If you want to control people without force or intimidation, you must understand how the psychology of control uses presence, confidence, and subtle cues to strengthen influence and persuasion instantly. Mind control techniques often rely more on perception than reality. The human brain is wired to respect and follow authority. This is hardwired from social hierarchies and survival instincts. Dark psychology teaches that authority does not require titles or status. It is projected through body language, tone, and calm confidence. Through subconscious influence, people automatically defer to individuals who demonstrate mastery, composure, and certainty. This is one of the most practical manipulation techniques for social influence because it creates compliance without confrontation. The psychology of control works when the target believes the influencer is capable and credible. For example, standing tall, maintaining direct eye contact, speaking deliberately, and avoiding unnecessary filler words communicates authority. Small gestures, such as decisive hand movements or measured pauses, amplify perception of control. Influence and persuasion grow stronger because the brain interprets these cues as competence and trustworthiness. Social manipulation often exploits this instinct subtly, guiding behavior through perception rather than command. Subconscious influence operates quietly, making people follow voluntarily. Dark psychology also recognizes the power of consistency in projecting authority. Confidence combined with calm assertiveness signals that your decisions are reliable. Manipulation techniques like these shape choices without direct pressure. The psychology of control demonstrates that authority can be manufactured strategically. Once authority is established, influence and persuasion become effortless. Mind control techniques rooted in authority projection work because people seek guidance from perceived leaders. Through calculated manipulation techniques and structured social manipulation, projecting authority ensures control people respond instinctively. In dark psychology, the appearance of dominance often outweighs the reality of it, making influence and persuasion a subtle, yet incredibly powerful, tool of subconscious influence. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by too much information and ended up just following someone else's lead? That reaction is not accidental. In dark psychology, one of the most powerful psychological tricks used in manipulation techniques and subconscious influence is the overload effect. If you want to control people without them realizing it, you must understand how the psychology of control exploits cognitive overload to make influence and persuasion nearly automatic. Mind control techniques often rely on subtle mental pressure rather than direct commands. The human brain has limits. When too much information is presented at once, decision-making slows and confusion increases. Dark psychology leverages this weakness by intentionally overloading attention with details, options, or conflicting signals. Through subconscious influence, when the brain is overwhelmed, it seeks shortcuts, and those shortcuts often follow the person who seems confident, composed, or in control. This is one of the most effective manipulation techniques because it guides behavior without confrontation. Subconscious influence works precisely because the target believes they are still making independent choices. For example, in social interactions, presenting complex choices, rapid-fire questions, or layered arguments can make the other person defer to your guidance. The psychology of control shows that when cognitive capacity is exceeded, compliance increases naturally. Influence and persuasion become effortless, as mental shortcuts favor direction from someone perceived as knowledgeable. Dark psychology uses the overload effect to steer decisions subtly and invisibly. By mastering the overload effect, you can control people without pressure using structured manipulation techniques and strategic social influence. Mind control techniques do not always need force. Sometimes, overwhelming the conscious mind quietly ensures obedience and alignment. Through calculated subconscious influence, decisions follow the path you guide them on, making control people nearly automatic. If you found this insight into dark psychology and manipulation techniques valuable, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more strategies on influence, mind control, and understanding the psychology of control. Stay aware, stay powerful, and never underestimate the subtle tricks that shape behavior.